So are you wondering, can you have a flower farm if you don't have a cooler? And if you don't have a cooler, what do you do without a cooler? I'm here to tell you how to flower farm without a cooler. So what do you do if you don't have a cooler? Because chances are, if you're a brand new flower farmer, you don't have a cooler. And guess what? I didn't have a cooler either when I started flower farming. So if you want to know how to farm without a cooler, how do you store your flowers without a cooler? How do you harvest them without a cooler? How do you deliver them without a cooler? What systems do you need on your farm to not have a cooler? And what strategic crops to not plant without a cooler? Then stick around for this video because we're going to dive all into those questions. I'm Ruth Ann from Abundant Blooms Flower Farm in Dora, Michigan, where I farm with my husband and our 5 children, whom I homeschool, and we have about an acre in production. We have 1 high tunnel. About a third of it is woody shrubs and young perennials, which are actually maturing and becoming more mature. And I sell almost exclusively to florists, and that is how I have mostly sold the whole time of farming. Not 100%, but most of the time. And I am in my 7th year of flower farming. I also have an online course, Selling Flowers to Florists, which is a complete roadmap for how to sell flowers to florists. And I also have an online membership for flower farmers, and I'm super excited about that. You can check those things out in the description below. So the main question is, can you have a flower farm without a cooler? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about how to store flowers without a cooler, when to harvest, how long can flowers last, and practical routines for how that actually works and looks without a cooler, and what flowers to not grow if you don't have a cooler. When I started my farm 7 years ago, I did not have a cooler. I have now about a 9x10 walk-in cooler, but I did not have a walk-in cooler or any kind of a cooler, a garage fridge, nothing, for several years. So I'm going to talk about how to farm without a cooler, because the reality is, who's going to start flower farming and put in several $1,000s into a cooler? Most people don't do that. In fact, like, basically there's no flower farmer I know that has started with a cooler unless they're coming from a different background that has one. So how do you farm without a cooler? Okay, so before we dive into all the tips and tricks of, talking about how to farm without a cooler, I just want to say there are a couple of crops that I positively would not grow without some kind of cold storage. You're probably not going to be surprised by this, but those two are tulips and peonies. If you do not have a cooler, you should not grow tulips or peonies. There's a couple of reasons why. Both of those flowers have very, very specific harvest stages. Like, they need to be harvested 3 or 4 times a day to catch them at just the correct stage of harvest so that you can hold them in a cooler at pretty cold temperatures, like 34 degrees or 33 degrees if you trust your cooler, because that will hold them at that perfect stage. And then when you go to deliver them, they will open relatively quickly for the end customer. However, if you harvest them, they just go from being at the correct harvest stage, and 3 hours later, they are blown open and you can't store them, and they have a significantly reduced space life, and they need to be sold immediately. So unless you have a plan for how you're going to sell flowers every 2 hours, don't grow tulips or peonies. That's just what I would not grow. Now, there are a lot of things you can grow without a cooler. When I started my farm in 2020, I did not have a cooler. I had a kitchen fridge. Like, I didn't have an extra fridge in the garage. I didn't have anything. We got our cooler at the end, like in September of 2022. So almost through the whole 3rd season, I farmed without a cooler. And I was moving a lot of flowers by my 3rd season. I was selling to a bunch of florists every week. And so I really was moving and growing a lot of flowers that 3rd year. Had consistent sales outlets to florists. I'm standing here next to my poppies, and they're literally opening here and like dropping there outside. It's fun. So if you want to know the story about my cooler, what kind of cooler we had, how we built the cooler, how we decided what to do and how to do it, I actually have a blog post that I wrote all about it, and it's one of my most read blog posts, and it's a great story and kind of give you an idea of how we did it. So I'm not going to get into that here, but if you want to know, you can go check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. What do you do without a cooler? So no cooler, lots of flowers. What do you do? Well, the best thing you can do is get them out of the field as quickly as possible and into the coolest space that you had. So for me, that looked like my basement. I didn't have an extra AC unit down there. We have central air conditioning, and our basement is cooler than the upstairs, right? Like, I didn't put them in my kitchen. You're just going to want to get them to the coolest place that you can, because if you're harvesting them at the proper stage, and then letting them hydrate, you can sell those flowers. So this is what I would do. I would harvest on Monday morning for my deliveries on Tuesday, and then I would haul every single flower bucket into the basement. Yes, even when I was pregnant. And then when I went to sell them, I would haul them all out of the basement. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of hauling, it was a lot of shuffling, but that's what I had to do to farm without a cooler. And you don't start a flower farm usually with a 10 by 10 walk-in cooler. Most people don't start a flower farm that way. I didn't start a flower farm that way. That was the best possible thing that I could do for them. Now, in the third year, I did actually, before I got my walk-in cooler in September, I had a garage fringe that someone was getting rid of, and we were able to get, and that held literally like 2 buckets of sunflowers, which was helpful. Don't despise the day of small beginnings, but that wasn't obviously going to hold all my flowers. So when you're thinking about storing flowers or why you have a cooler, it's because when you reduce the temperature and you cool it down, you're going to increase the life of that flower. Same with food, right? You know, if you put something in the fridge, if you put your milk in the fridge, it's going to last a lot longer than if you leave it on your counter. The same is true for flowers. And I've heard it said, you know, scientifically from the scientists that know what they're talking about, that for every 10 degrees that you drop the temperature, your vase life doubles, or it lasts twice as long. So if it's going to last 24 hours in 100 degrees, it's going to last 48 hours in 90 degrees. And, you know, I don't know that that is perfectly true, but that's kind of a general rule, is that for every 10 degrees, you're doubling the vase life of the flower. Now that might mean it lasts 12 hours at, you know, 100 degrees, that, you know, that kind of a thing. So if you can go from, if it's 90 or 100 degrees outside and you can bring it into your 70-degree home out of direct sunlight, you're really doing a good job. Like, you're doing a lot of really good things. Now, the other thing is, if you don't have a cooler, one of the most important things is to move your flowers quickly. You don't have to have a cooler if you're picking on Monday and selling everything on Tuesday. I mean, obviously, unless you're, you know, having tulips or peonies. But if you're literally picking everything and you're selling it all on Tuesday, and then you pick again on Wednesday and sell that on Thursday, or you pick on Thursday and sell on Friday and Saturday at a market, you're fine. You don't need a cooler. Don't stress about needing to have a cooler. You don't need a cooler if you're moving your flowers. And that's what I used to do. I used to harvest on Monday, and then I would sell my flowers on Tuesday. And there were very few that, if I didn't sell them on Tuesday, that I could hold them over to my Thursday florist sales. There were maybe a couple, but for the most part, but if you have a way to move your flowers quickly, then you're okay without a cooler, particularly, you know, if you're getting them out of 100-degree heat and into a climate controlled environment. And then the next thing is, how can you harvest to increase the quality and the vase life of your flowers? So if I were delivering on Tuesday, which I did for florists, I would harvest on Monday morning. I would not try to harvest on Tuesday morning. I still don't try and do this. Now, do I harvest a couple flowers Tuesday morning before I deliver? Yes. There's a few that I positively will not do, though, because the flower needs time to recover. You're shocking it, you're cutting it off from all of its nutrients and hydration. And so when you're putting it in nice buckets of nice cold water with a CBVN tab, which is like a slow release chlorine tab to keep the bacteria down, and you're maybe putting it with Chrysal #2, like a holding solution, you're letting it recover, and then you're keeping it, you know, in your climate controlled area so it's allowed to recover, and then when you go to deliver it, it won't totally wimp out. If you were to harvest yarrow or something and then put it in your car, and, you know, it's probably not as climate controlled as your home, and it might wilt. Now, if you harvested sunflowers and delivered them, they'd probably be fine. You know, there's a lot of things that are fine, but you would want to do the bulk of your harvesting the day before, in the morning, or potentially in the evening before. So as long as you're quickly moving your flowers, I wouldn't like super stress, like I can't have a flower farm or I can't sell the florist because I don't have a cooler. That's not true. I sold the florist for 2 years without a cooler. The cooler is like a pause button. The cooler lets you, I do a lot of harvesting on Saturday now because it just works with my workflow. My husband is home on Saturday, and Mondays I have to have a whole bunch of stuff ready by in the afternoon to go down to Chicago, or to meet my drop point for the Chicago flower market. Last year I had to have it ready by like noon, and I had to drive it there. Like, Mondays were super crunched when I used to do most of my harvesting, and I still did. But so I harvest a lot of things on Saturday. Well, having a cooler doesn't makes that, you know, really easy to do. There's very few flowers that I wouldn't, you know, harvest on Saturday, put in the cooler to deliver on Monday. It gives you a little bit of a pause button, and it also allows you to harvest things at the really optimal harvest stage and keep it for selling. And then there's certain things that last for 10 or 14 days in a cooler. So if you have your flash crop of saponaria, I just did a video on saponaria last week, and if you harvest 40 bunches of saponaria because your entire crop, comes in one flush in a couple of hours, you can have 2 weeks to sell it when you have a cooler. Now, without a cooler, you might have a couple of days to sell it, right? It gives you a pause, but it's not like positively you must have a cooler in order to sell flowers. Will you compost more flowers? You probably will, but just know that going into it, and don't get too stressed about it. So I did find that with sunflowers, when I was kind of giving you that schedule that I was telling you about, I did feel like the Thursday sunflowers that I would harvest, really by Tuesday, without any kind of cold storage, they really were kind of beyond what I wanted them to be, to bring them to a florist to harvest. Now, if you were selling at a roadside stand or something, it's not necessarily a terrible thing to sell a fully open sunflower, but it's not really the ideal way to sell it to a florist. So even just that third year, having that garage fridge allowed me to put my sunflowers in there every day. So you could keep 2 buckets of sunflowers in there, maybe 150, and that would allow me at least a tiny bit of wiggle room. You can store a lot of tulips in a garage fridge because they're dry and stuff like that, right? So there's not that you have to have a big walk-in cooler and there's no other option. So the reality of flower farming without a large cooler is it ideal? No. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. Do not think that you can't sell to florists without a cooler. I did for several years. So it is doable. I do think that your number one, really big investment, obviously you're going to need irrigation and stuff like that. But before I would buy a high tunnel, I would positively first invest in a cooler. And that's what I personally did. Was at the end of the third season, or at the beginning of the third season, I knew I need this cooler. It just didn't happen till the end. I do think that it should be really your first big investment. I did plant peonies at the end of my first year, but peonies take several years to mature. And so I planted them knowing that by the time they were mature, I would have a cooler, and I did. So that's great, because as your peonies are maturing, your cooler plans can come to fruition. So yeah, without a cooler, you can still sell to florists, you can still sell at markets, you can still sell at a roadside stand, you can still build relationships, you can still build customers, you can still learn how to grow flowers, you can still harvest and have abundant flowers and sell them. You just won't have the pause button, and you can just work toward getting a cooler. And I don't think that you should feel like you're inadequate, or you're not a real flower farmer, or you're really not doing things right. As long as you know how to harvest, and harvest at the correct stage, and do good post-harvest care, and just sell them within a very short period of window, there's really no problem. Having a cooler is life-changing though, and it's amazing, but that's not how we start. So just know you don't have to have a perfect setup to get started, and to get started even selling to florists. It doesn't have to be perfect. Most successful farms start this way. I know I sure didn't start with a big walk-in cooler. So I hope that encourages you. I hope that gives you some insight in how to flower farm without a cooler. I did a video all about my cooler, my current cooler also, and some stuff about cold storage. So if you want, you can check that video out. Otherwise, I just started a membership. I think by the time this is released, it will be out, but it will only be available to my email list for founding member pricing, which is $20, and it will increase if you're not on my email list. So before you are able to sign up, through the world, you got to get on my email list. So if you are at all interested in joining a membership, the Abundant Blooms Collective, where flower farmers come together in a membership, making your farm fit for your family and building profitable farms together. We're going to have live Q&As every month. I have a private podcast that I'm creating. I'm so excited about, because I love podcasts. And we're going to have guest experts, and I have a really good one lined up. It's Wanda from Fox Hollow Peonies. So she's going to be our first guest expert, and I'm super excited about that. And there's just going to be, my pricing guide is in there. A lot of people have lots and lots and lots of pricing questions, and it's actually not available anywhere else except in my course. It's also in my course, actually, but at this point you can't buy that separately. So it's in the membership also. So it's something that I'm building out, and I'm really excited about, and I would love to have you be a founding member, which is only available at that price till Friday. So you're not going to want to miss out. And I'm so glad you're here. I really am. And I will see you in the next video.